This is Spencer with The MacGuffin, and today I'm joined by Matthew Heineman, the director of City of Ghosts. Having a little bit of a deja vu day with interviews. So you were here in, 2015 for Cartel Land, was that correct?
I was, yes.
So it's good to relive this glory of 2015 SIFF here. But
Yes.
you come today with City of Ghosts. It seems like you have a lot of things going on, so I don't know if it's best to call this your newest documentary or latest documentary that's come out, which discusses rock is being silently slaughtered in Syria.
Slaughtered silently.
Slaughtered silently? Okay. Let's get this very clear. And I want to sort of start by understanding what sort of drew you to this project. I mean, obviously you've got a very interesting sort of geopolitical interest, but what was it that brought you specifically to Syria and covering it now as opposed to earlier or later or whatever?
Yeah. So I was traveling around the country and really the world with my last film, Cartel Land, and ISIS was becoming front page news. And I was deeply disturbed by what was happening and started reading obsessively about the group and about this phenomenon and trying to see if there's a way to make a film. I eventually read this article in the New Yorker by David Remnick about this group, Rock is being slaughtered silently. A group of friends who banded together to expose what ISIS was doing in their hometown after ISIS took it over. And immediately I knew that this was my way into the story. And I reached out to the guys, two of whom happened to be relatively nearby in the States. And that night I sat down with them and told them what I wanted to do. And then a week later I started filming.
That's amazing. One of the interesting things about Cartel Land was how hands-on you were in terms of that production. I mean, meeting with like the drug dealers and stuff like that. What was it sort of like having to, I guess, be a step removed from a lot of the coverage? Because, I mean, you're not going into rock to do this hands-on recording yourself. So you're dealing with sort of this group to get this footage to tell the story in some ways. Is that challenging? Does it increase the concern because you're not able to, I guess, put yourself in danger? I mean, these people are putting themselves in danger to get this footage out there. What is it sort of like as a documentary filmmaker to have to, I guess, relinquish some of that control and danger and concern for a project like this?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the dangers are much different in the two films. And, you know, in Cartel Land, I was in shootouts, I was in meth labs, I was in torture chambers, in very visceral, immediate danger. Whereas in City of Ghosts, the danger is much more sort of amorphous or sort of omnipresent to some degree. You know, most of what I filmed was these guys escaping ISIS, escaping from Syria to Turkey and Turkey to Europe, being on the run as ISIS was hunting them after ISIS killed members of their group. And so, you know, we were filming in safe houses, filming, you know, as they were in hiding. And so it was scary, but in a much different way. And I knew that I wanted the main through line of the film to be this exodus, to be this journey away as they're escaping. But I also knew that I wanted to cut back and forth to life inside Raqqa with the amazing footage that they that this group had captured within Raqqa, within the capital of the Islamic State, to show what life is truly like, to counter the propaganda narrative that ISIS had disseminated through their very slick videos.
Yeah, I mean, the production value of those ISIS videos which you display in the film is incredible. Like, I mean, the investment they've spent on that is disturbing, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, you know, some of the videos rival Hollywood films, and it's deeply disturbing. They do it for two reasons. One, to disseminate fear all across the world through sort of shock and awe videos, and two, to attract recruits. And they've been successful at both of those things. And, you know, I think unfortunately and sadly and frighteningly that is not going to end anytime soon. You know, as they lose power, as they lose territory in Iraq and Syria, they're going to resort more and more to using propaganda and these horrific acts of terror that they've been known for, and that we've seen very recently as well.
One of the sort of question marks I always have with films like this is, how do you sort of decide when to begin and end that story? Because like, it's not like the end is like, hey, Syria's saved, like end of the day, roll credits sort of situation. I mean, this is still very much an ongoing situation. So how do you sort of decide like to cap it and be like, okay, I feel like we can close it here, because it feels like, I mean, there's probably been a million additional details that have occurred since the film was like wrapped. But how do you sort of make that call of like, I feel like I can tell what I want to tell and it's able to capture it enough, or I feel like I've got enough footage that I know what story there is to tell?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the perennial question of a documentary of when to stop. Obviously it's not scripted, or at least the films that I make aren't scripted. There's various reasons why you stop. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's
sure.
Things happening in your life or whatever it is. For me, with City of Ghosts, it was, I really wanted to follow this, as I said, this journey from Syria and eventually, via Turkey to Europe. And so when that, one of the arcs was them getting settled in Europe, and I knew that was part of the third act and what life was like in this new land. But also for me, these guys have been through so much, been through more than we could have ever imagined. Tortured by Assad, arrested by Assad, arrested by ISIS, tortured by ISIS, lost many, many friends, family members, colleagues in this effort, and continue to live with death threats and daily fear. And so that emotional journey was very important to me, and the access to that was very important to me. And so I fought really hard to become a part of the daily fabric of their lives. And so part of what I was seeking was the stoicism that they had, with which they carried themselves, was part of what kept them going. But I knew behind that there's obviously that all of these things had a massive effect on them. And so there's a scene at the end of the film in which that is revealed.
Yeah, it's very much on display.
And the emotions and the trauma that they'd experienced was very rawly displayed. And so once that scene happened, I knew that I had a film. I sort of reached that point that I was seeking.
Yeah, it's a very visceral display of an emotional sort of sensibility. One of the interesting things for me is, even just thinking about from a SIFF perspective, I remember 3 or 4 years ago interviewing some people who did the film Chicago Girl, which is also about Syria and using social media as a mechanism for organizing in Syria. Is there something specific that you've been able to sort of take away from the people from Syria? Because it seems like they seem very organized in terms of using social media for activism, in terms of telling their own story. It seems much more than a lot of other places in the region. They have been able to sort of try and capture their life and try and make the message of what they're saying get out there a little bit more. Was there anything that you were able to observe about the country, or I don't know what the sort of origin of that sort of sensibility is? Because it seems like, I mean, sadly, now we're talking at least 4 years later and things are still terribly going on there, but there seems to be a almost inspirational sort of aspect of it, that these people, despite all these horrific things going on, continue to sort of like truly fight. Like, I mean, something we take for granted in America with like protesting Trump or whatever, it's a fairly minor thing, but these people have continued to risk their lives for many years now to get their story and whatnot out there. What is it sort of you take away from that sort of, I don't know, perspective, I guess? Or is there anything to take away?
Yeah, I don't. I'm definitely not a student of sort of cross comparative citizen journalism analysis of the Middle East and the Arab Spring. I think what has happened in Syria has been occurring in other countries as well. It's a statement of our times. Decades ago, not too distant past, these atrocities would occur, and no one would know about that. Traditional journalists weren't able to capture it, and therefore the world didn't truly know what was happening. With the Arab Spring, part of the phenomenon of the Arab Spring was obviously the proliferation of and democratization of technology to allow citizens to become journalists, to allow citizens to capture imagery, both exposing the horrors of these leaders and the horrors that they're committing, obviously, especially in the case of Syria and in the case of President Bashar al-Assad, but also to disseminate ideas and thoughts and views via Twitter and social media, to organize, to come together, to speak out, to voice these ideas that have been held inside of them. And so, what we see in Rockets Being Slaughtered Silently is an outgrowth of that, really. Many of these guys were activists during the Arab Spring, were activists during the revolution, and so when ISIS came in and took over, it was only natural that they'd start to expose the atrocities of ISIS. But they didn't have to do this. This was not they weren't being paid. This was not in their DNA. They didn't go to school to become journalists. They were training to be lawyers and doctors and scientists. This was a choice. And this is a choice that they made. And some of them suffered
greatly. Yeah.
Greatly. They've all suffered greatly, but some of them obviously were killed. And so, yeah.
One of the interesting things about the project for me was that I saw Alex Gibney was involved in some capacity. What was his involvement, and were you able to learn anything? I mean, obviously you're a very talented document filmmaker in your own right. I mean, nominated for an Academy Award. But he is a very prolific documentary filmmaker working for many, many years. Is there any sort of thing you were able to take away from working with him? What was that sort of experience like, I guess, just in general?
Alex is amazing. I'm a big fan of his, and he executive produced the film, and incredibly supportive throughout the making of the film. Wasn't necessarily involved in the day-to-day of the film, but he's an incredibly wise friend, as well as obviously a wise filmmaker, and so it was wonderful to collaborate with him.
Very cool. So the film is City of Ghosts. It's playing here at SIFF now. Is there a future rollout plan you want people to know about for people who want to see this film now? Is there a website that people should keep track of?
Yeah.
What is it that people should do for their next step in sort of seeing this film and then sort of understanding and moving forward?
Yeah, it's being released this summer in theaters on July 14th. So if you're around in July, please go.
I highly recommend.
Please go check it out.
Is there a website?
Website cityofghosts.com.
Very easy.
Facebook page, obviously, as well, and Twitter. And I think documentaries need all the help they can get.
No, absolutely. And I think it's both a very well-made documentary, and it is a subject that is something we cannot turn our eye on. I mean, it's one of those things that's easy to get lulled into a false sense of security because the U.S. has been a relatively safe country for so long.
Right.
But, clearly, this film shows things can turn very quickly in some of these places. So, thank you so much for both making it and doing this interview.
Yeah, of course.
Best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Hope to see you in another 2 years with something else that's fascinating.
Let's hope. Thank you.
Can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. Magneto can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. Even Zod can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. It's tight. Don't even try to bite the side of style. Mr. Spock can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. The Wrath of Khan can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. The Borg can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. Because I've got space game and it feels alright.